Okay, welcome to ME3TV. I'm here with Stuart Diamond at the Jay Museum in Jay, Florida, and we need to maintain our what is it we're trying to maintain?
Anonymity?
Anonymity.
That'd work.
We need to maintain anonymity, so because we don't want to be stopped on the street all the time for autographs.
Yeah, that's a pain.
Discussions,
Yeah.
all this. So, but we both support the Jay Museum, and when we have an opportunity, we like to talk with or read about people that are famous and in this area anyway. And today we were reading the Tri-City Ledger, which is published over in Flomaton, I believe, or is it published in Atmore?
Well, yeah, it may be printed in Atmore.
So,
But,
who are the
office,
three
I think.
cities anyway?
Flomaton, Century, and Jay.
Not Bruton. Flomaton, Century, and Jay is the Tri-Cities.
Tri-City area.
All three cities are booming metropolis locations. If you were here in around 1910. Right now, maybe they're not quite as booming. Anyway, one of our favorite authors here in the Tri-City Ledger is Kevin McKinley. He's an attorney over there in Canoe, and he writes these stories about the past. He even has a book out, the Book of Shadows and Dust 3, so several books on legacies and stories from the area, which you ought to look into. I think you can find them online at lulu.com. Kevin wrote this story last week on murder in Canoe leads to a big trial. First of all, you got to know that Canoe was at one point in time a bustling small metropolis, but it's nothing now, right?
Well, because it was on the railroad.
It was on the railroad.
Without the railroad.
And did Atmore even exist then? Williams Station. It was Williams Station.
Yes.
1900. Atmore wasn't very much to it. But it's pretty much home now of right out of Atmore is the home of the Porch Creek tribe. It pretty much owns most of the area now.
Well, yes.
You have a casino, that's near Atmore, is that
Yeah,
right?
an entertainment center, movies, and bowling alley, and
But
all kind of things.
Canoe it went through ghost town period, and now I think it's coming back. They may even have a small gas station somewhere nearby.
Really do.
Well, once they get a Dollar General, there'll be something.
Well, hey, man, we've got one in Berrydale, so my goodness,
Yeah.
they're trailing us.
The story this week in Tri-City Ledger is about murder in Canoe. It leads to a big trial. Turns out this fellow Jesse Troutman and Fred Hancock got into a little bit of a tiff. Now, interesting people though. Jesse Troutman was a young fellow that grew up in Pollard and then moved to Canoe. And it was there he contracted maybe polio or something. He never became a healthy individual and was crippled. But in the course of all that, he pushed through and he managed to get a degree and he taught school. And as luck would have it, he had some trips back to his hometown in Pollard, which was right on the border of Florida, and just north of Jay. He met and fell in love with a young girl named Ellie Winfield Weaver. Well, there turns out her family, her brothers, and one of her relatives, this Hancock fella, they didn't really want her to marry this weakling guy. He only weighed 70, 80 pounds. His foot dragged. He had a limpy arm, and he was a school teacher, and probably had thick glasses. What else? Probably Anyway, he might have had a big nose and a mustache for all we know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're popular now, you know.
yeah. Anyway, big fight comes up between the family of the young girl and this Troutman guy. He decides to go and have a showdown with them, or talk it out with them at the train station. And by golly, right there in Canoe, one of them shoots Troutman, kills him. And then the trial begins to take place. And both of these families were prominent families in the area, so the trial was going to be a big deal. Troutman's brothers were at the trial. The girl who was the betrothed, or to become betrothed girl, she's at the trial, and her brothers are there, and obviously one of them is he's on trial for murder, having killed Troutman. And sadly, in this week's paper, that's where we're left with a cliffhanger, and we have to buy next week's paper to find out what happened. It sounds like it's going to be an exciting trial. You want to go?
No, I'm gonna read the paper next week, see what happens.
Okay. But that...
Now, I've always wanted to be a time traveler, but I don't think we're gonna get back there to be at the trial.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you don't take the Tri-City Ledger, you're missing out on a treat in this area.
Absolutely.
Because it's the only paper I've seen in this whole area of the north end of our county that really takes any interest in kind of the local legends and stories. One of our other favorite people in this Tri-City Ledger is Earlene Smith Cruz. We follow her on Facebook. Earlene Cruz grew up on the Little Escambia River north of Bruton, a little place called, what's the name of that place called? Barnett's Crossroads.
Barnett's? I wasn't sure.
Barnett's Crossroads. Nobody's ever heard of it apparently except the people that grew up there.
Yeah.
And it's a very small place.
I think I was lost there one time. Yeah.
Well, I've been.
But I'm not sure there was a sign, so could have been there. Could have been somewhere else.
Tell you what, first time I heard about Barnett's Crossroads was whenever I found out about this thing. I was talking to a fellow down in Florida town by the name of Charles Falk. Charles had been in the timber industry for 100 years. And somewhere around 1960, 65, he was at Barnett's Crossroads, and he was chopping timber, cutting timber, pulling logs, whatever. And he saw a meteorite come out of the sky, a smoking trail, and then they saw smoke coming up in the woods over where they thought it must have hit. So they got in their truck and they motored over there, and they found some smoldering fire and put that out. And then they dug around a little bit where they thought the thing must have hit, and they pulled up this piece, what looks like a piece of glass.
It does.
And he thought
It's like melted
he had
glass.
found himself a chunk of meteorite. He's had this investigated by the people at West Florida and geologists all over that are knowledgeable in these things. And turns out, well, I'll tell you what, you need to watch on ME3TV and see the story with Charles Falk talking about this piece of glass. And you'll learn all about how it happened, and where you might even get a clue where is Barnett's Crossroads from watching this. It's on YouTube. Go to me3tv.org, or to make it easy, everything we mentioned here will be posted at 12ponder.com. 12ponder.com. That's where I'm going to post any links that you need to find updates to these stories. I'm going to put this rock down. Now that we know a little bit about Barnett's Crossroads.
You reckon this is where they were doing some samples?
Who knows?
I think so.
where they scrape that stuff out.
Or cut it.
Anyway, Mr. Falk was
That was amazing.
all excited about this.
Yeah, I would be too.
But he'd had that in his house for like,
You know what it
what,
looks
50,
like?
60 years.
Like a bunch of melted down Coca-Cola bottles.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. But we
But
only
you
will
gotta
find out.
return.
You'll never know. Would you?
If you don't watch again, at some time.
But Earlene wrote this book about the day the farm kids formed their own revolution. I mean, you gotta read Earlene to understand that you're talking about a classic literary genius here.
Absolutely.
So it turns out she and her sisters were hired labor to go around on their own farm. They didn't get paid for that, but if they could get their own farm taken care of, they would go and hire themselves out to other people, tenant farmers that needed help, farmers that owned their own land that needed help, and they'd pull grass out of the cotton, or they'd hoe cotton, or they'd pick cotton. Listen, I can relate to a little bit of this. I did some of this when I was a kid, and this is why today I avoid work. At the drop of a hat, I can avoid work. It took it out of me. Well, anyway, Earlene and her little siblings, they all worked like little champions out there in the cotton fields and pulling grass. In this particular story, she's pulling grass with her siblings. They hired out to a tenant farmer to pull the grass, water grass and other grass. As she says it, around 1955, they worked in their own fields every day to fight the scourge of watergrass, bahia grass, smut grass, watergrass, ironweed, pursley, watergrass, sand spurs, sawbriars, crabgrass, nutgrass, persimmon bushes, watergrass, and watergrass.
A lot of watergrass out there.
Apparently,
Yeah,
apparently she says if you've never run into watergrass, you don't have a clue.
yeah.
So they were out there with this tenant farmer pulling all this watergrass, and he's beginning to hem and haw about whether or not he's going to pay them or not for the day's work. And after about 3 hours, his attitude was getting to him. They weren't too happy about his lazy, worthless son sitting on the porch watching them while they worked to do this hot, thankless job, which would hopefully give them a few pennies to take home and buy their school clothes with. Well, you got to read the story, but she says here, they got paid off in watermelons, and they went back and they loaded up on prized watermelons several times because the market price on melons kept dropping, and they were still owed their $3. And so every time the price dropped, they got more melons in result for their pay. And through the years, they've enjoyed the drama of the Great Rebellion. All this happened because it was a decade before the Cesar Chavez organization of the National Farm Workers Association in California. They were activists in fair labor practices long before those field workers took back their rights for being treated with dignity and fairness. So actually a leader in the farm labor revolution was Earlene Smith Cruz and her little sisters and brothers that fought for their rights and their pay for pulling watergrass out of the field.
That's fact. That's fact.
This is the kind of stuff you get in the Tri-City Ledger, and you get to meet interesting people like me and Stuart if you come to the J Museum. And actually the museum's open here in J, right across from the Napa Auto Parts store.
And not to forget our famous light out there. Our
Yeah.
traffic light, right down the road from the traffic light.
Yeah, if you step out the front door of the museum and turn left, you run into the traffic light.
Yep, yep.
So, all of that. And it's open when?
Fridays and Saturdays from 10 to 2.
3.
3, excuse me.
Unless
Come early, stay late.
occasionally a volunteer will feel they're not getting enough traffic that day, or they feel like they've been abused by the public that refuses to show up, and they may leave it too. But mostly from 10 to 3, Fridays and Saturdays.
Yes. And any other time by appointment?
Yeah. Call the website, right?
Call the website.
jhistoricalsociety.com. Org. jhistoricalsociety.org.
Yep.
And
A lot of good files on there.
oh man, there's stuff on there that you can read without even having to come to the museum.
Yep.
You don't even have to come to the museum. You can go to the cloud and see a lot of this stuff. Fantastic history, but you can't touch it. So you have to come to the museum, and you can touch it. We let you touch stuff. And I hope you'll come. Again, all that I've mentioned here on this podcast will be referenced at 12ponder.com. The numbers 1 and 2, PONDER, ponder.com. And that'll make it easy for you to find information about the newspaper, about the museum, about Charles.
And I did not know that. Charles Falk, you said.
You didn't know what?
About 1-2 Ponder.
Well,
But I do now.
it's just,
So I'm going to go home right in a few minutes and
well, I'll have
check
to,
that baby out.
don't be too quick. I gotta put this on the computer and I'll make sure the link is there for you.
Yeah,
But,
okay.
I'll have the stuff there for you. Hope you enjoyed this, and we'll try to bring you a little bit more interesting, in-depth information about our area in future broadcasts.
Might be able to show you some of the exhibits that we have here. Like we've got a lot of the J High School pictures, probably 75 annuals from Central and J and Chemukla.
Yeah.
Maybe a Munson thrown in there, and Fidelis, and school pictures, bunches of them. Some of this was fixing to be, especially these pictures over here, were fixing to be thrown out when they were building the new high school. And people who were in the Historical Society back then, and sadly I was not one of them, heard about it and rescued. And it's one of our most popular exhibits now, because almost everybody comes in here. I'll ask them, you know, are you lost or what? Oh, well, I was from Jay once. And I says, well, you know anybody went to school at Jay? Yeah, sure. I said, let's go look. Because we probably got them on the wall back here.
And you find them, and it's strange.
Yeah.
And a lot of them haven't changed at all. So I see your picture there.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
just like you.
it does. It does.
Just, you hadn't
Except
changed.
my hair was a little blonder back then.
Another thing we're going to do with this podcast, we're going to actually have guests on the show. We'll have probably, if we're lucky, could pay her enough money, we'll get Arlene Smith Cruz to come on. We might even get we might get Kevin McKinley to come. We might get Roy Allen. I don't know if you know Roy, but there's a guy full of stories. And we might get Dr. Brian Rucker, who knows more about this local history than anybody's. Fun guy to listen to.
He is.
If you don't know Brian, you're missing a lot. Written a lot of books on this area. You'll find links at 12 Ponder to a lot of these people and places where you can learn more about them and learn more about the stuff that they have a passion for. And good chance you could be passionate about those kind of things too. Well, it's been fun. We will maintain our anonymity, and so you won't even know who we are on the street because we have excellent disguises.
No way they could figure me
You'll
out.
never, no, you would never figure out who we are.
Nope.
Thank goodness, because we don't like publicity.
It's-
Please don't tell anybody about this, because we don't want our families to know. And if we did, they would probably be embarrassed. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you in the next podcast.